We're joined now by Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel. Attorney General, in your statement today after the Chauvin verdict, you said that we cannot simply be satisfied by a verdict, that it must be a catalyst for change. What change would you like to see going forward?
Well, very quickly after the killing of George Floyd last year, my office issued a number of suggestions, mostly that are legislative in nature. There's so much that we can be doing and that we should be doing to make substantive change and reforms that are badly needed in terms of policing. It's just we need to have a willing legislature that wants to implement these changes. And I've had, I think, some substantive and encouraging discussions with both Democrats and Republicans in the State House and Senate. But unfortunately, we've seen little progress since George Floyd's death last year. I'm hoping that that will soon change.
Is today's verdict a statement about holding bad cops accountable, or is it a call for wholesale systemic changes when it comes to the concept of policing?
I think it's both of those things. You know, I'll tell you that many years ago when I worked for the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, I was in their public integrity unit, and I handled officer-involved shootings. I handled in-custody deaths. The fact of the matter was it was very, very difficult under virtually any circumstances to get an on-duty police officer convicted of anything when it came to crimes committed against members of the community. I think that that has changed a lot in the last 20 years. And it's changed especially recently since people have been recording the encounters with police officers. And so I think it's very important that we take advantage of this moment and not just see it as sort of a one-off and see that Derek Chauvin has been held accountable for the murder of George Floyd, but use it to recognize the problems that we have in policing in this state and all around this country. And if you look at some of these proposals that we've set forth, I mean, we're not talking about anything that should be too dramatic. I mean, regular continued training of police officers that we don't have. Continuing education is generally something that we accept for all licensed professions, but we don't really do it for police officers. How can we expect someone who doesn't have regular training to be the best at their job? In terms of MCOL's certification, we make it so difficult for a police officer to lose their license, and we hold them to a standard that is not as high as every other profession. So, for instance, you have a licensing board for accountants, for doctors, for dentists, for lawyers, and you can lose your license to practice under a variety of circumstances. With police officers, it's very, very hard once an officer has been licensed for them to have their license suspended or revoked. And we need to do more in terms of making sure that when you have instances where officers are alleged to have committed misconduct, that they can be more easily investigated and, if need be, have licensing repercussions. So there are a lot of different things that, honestly, they're not so dramatic in nature, but I think that will have a big impact on policing across this state, and we need to be seriously considering.
And you did touch on it a little there about holding police accountable. It's been elusive for this type of behavior. Will today's verdict make it any easier for those bad officers to be prosecuted?
I think it might. I will say this was a unique set of circumstances to me, in that you had so many prosecution witnesses that were police officers. That's very unusual to see. It's very rare that you see police officers testifying against other police officers. I think it speaks to perhaps a resetting of the way that these cases will be tried. But in addition, I think to the particularly egregious nature of Derek Chauvin's actions in this set of circumstances. We have so many cases that you can look back, and I think we have allowed officers to say, well, this was a split-second decision, and the officer feared for their lives or for other people's lives, and had to make that very, very quick decision as to whether or not to unload their firearm. This was an instance, obviously, of Officer Chauvin, kneeling on George Floyd's neck for in excess of 9 minutes. He had over 9 minutes to decide to remove his knee so that this man could breathe and not die, and he refused to do so. So, this case is exceptionally horrific. But obviously, anytime you have a person whose life is lost, not just unnecessarily, but illegally in a manner that is unjustified, someone needs to be held accountable in those set of circumstances. And I will say that's why my department has taken such an active role in terms of investigating and, when necessary, prosecuting these cases, which traditionally was not done by the Department of Attorney General. I was surprised when I came into office and learned that these were not the kinds of cases that they had previously handled. But I thought it was important that we start doing it. And so each time that a person loses their life at the hands of a police officer, whether that's an in-custody death or whether it's an officer-involved shooting or what have you, I think it's important that those cases always be properly investigated and thoroughly analyzed. And then in the event that an officer has committed a crime, that they're held accountable.
Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, thank you for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me.